Thom Hartmann here on the news. You need to know this. Tens of thousands of people flooded the streets of Oakland yesterday to participate in Occupy Oakland's call for a general strike. Banks, businesses, and schools across the city shut down, with about one-fifth of the city's teachers skipping school to participate in the strike, the first of its kind in a major city in the United States in 65 years. As evening fell, roughly 10,000 patriots marched to the port of Oakland. A peaceful crowd blocked all the entrances and then mounted containers, cranes, and trucks, forcing the nation's fifth busiest port and a major entry point for imported Asian-manufactured goods to shut down for the night. But after the crowd dispersed and went home, the streets of Oakland were again turned into a war zone as a small group of protesters set a fire in the middle of the street. After midnight, tear gas canisters and flashbangs were deployed by police to disperse the crowds, putting a tumultuous cap on a peaceful day of action. Seattle, New York, and Washington, D.C., as well as several other cities, held solidarity marches with Occupy Oakland as well yesterday. America is beginning to look like Europe, with young people in open revolt against a system that only benefits the top 1%. While the rich are getting richer, the ranks of the poor are growing. According to a new AP report, there are more than 20 million Americans living well below the poverty line. These Americans, defined as the poorest of the poor, live on 50% or less of the official poverty level, and 20 million is the highest number ever recorded since the Census Bureau started compiling this data 35 years ago. 40 states across the nation saw an increase in the number of extremely poor people since 2007, with the highest jumps in Nevada and Florida. This is a national crisis. Yet today, Republicans in the Senate will filibuster to block another part of President Obama's Jobs Act that would have put 450,000 Americans back to work rebuilding our nation's infrastructure. Instead of looking out for the 20 million impoverished Americans who desperately need a good-paying job, Republicans will vote to protect people who take home more than $1 million a year from a less than 1% tax increase. In the best of the rest of the news, want to know how your cash-strapped state can save money? By switching to a single-payer healthcare system. Vermont's plans to craft a single-payer healthcare system received a boost yesterday when a new report by the Legislative Joint Fiscal Office found that the state will save as much as $1.8 billion over the next decade by shifting to single-payer health care. According to the report, under such a system, there's less money needed for fraud reduction programs, administrative costs, and clinical reforms, and nothing gets skimmed off the top by the fat cat insurance industry CEOs. So not only is it more humane to ensure that every citizen has a right to basic health care, it's far more fiscally sound as well. Federal authorities arrested 4 men in Georgia Tuesday who were plotting to commit terrorism, but since they weren't Muslims, there's little coverage of the threat in the corporate media. The men belong to a fringe militia group planning to attack government officials with guns, explosives, and the toxin ricin. According to the FBI criminal complaint, the group was inspired to commit violence by a book written by Mike Vanderdoe, who has been featured on Fox So-Called News and has hyped the Justice Department's so-called Fast and Furious scandal. Vanderdoe's book tells the story of a small militia group starting a civil war against the federal government. It's stories like these that remind us that despite spending $1 trillion on new weapons to hunt terrorists in the Middle East after 9/11, the biggest threats still remain right here at home in the thousands of militia groups that have been whipped into a paranoid frenzy by irresponsible political rhetoric from the right. Republicans are protecting BP. After a new report on the BP oil spill was released a few weeks ago, outlining what mistakes the transnational oil corporation BP made, leading to the death of 11 men and the destruction of the Gulf coastline, Democrats on the House National Resources Committee wanted to hold a hearing to get an explanation from the CEOs of BP, Transocean, and Halliburton. But yesterday, Republicans on the committee blocked Democrats from issuing any subpoenas. As ranking Democrat on the committee, Congressman Ed Markey said, Republicans have put the CEOs from the companies responsible for the worst offshore oil spill in our history into a witness protection program when they should be helping to produce these witnesses before the committee so they can answer questions about their spill. I guess Republicans figure if big oil CEOs are in jail, and that means less campaign cash for the GOP. In Greece, we're learning what happens when you defy banksters. Just days after announcing he will let the Greek people determine the fate of their country and not international banking institutions, Prime Minister Papandreou is being forced out of office. Papandreou's decision to hold a national vote on whether or not Greece should be bailed out shocked other European leaders and financial giants in Greece who feared that the people may reject a bailout, triggering a default and a financial panic. As members of his own party and government ministers turned on Papandreou, he held an emergency meeting with the president of Greece today to announce a new coalition government under the leadership of a former Greek central banker, Lucas Papademos. The move puts plans of a national referendum in jeopardy and once again leaves Greece to the whims of the international banksters. Crazy alert, the most ironic robbery ever. Florida police are looking for a man who robbed 41-year-old Anthony Williams at gunpoint earlier this week, stealing $65 from Williams' wallet. Police have one description to go by. The thief was wearing a Ronald Reagan mask. The main suspect is a local troublemaker who hangs out at an arcade and has also been known to snatch purses wearing that mask. So far, police have yet to nab the suspect. It's unclear what the Reagan robber did with the $65 he stole, but if true to form, he likely handed it over to some rich guy nearby. Reaganomics hits the streets. And that's the way it is today, Thursday, November 3rd, 2011. I'm Thom Hartmann on the news.